Well, welcome back. Decoding the Conflict Mindset with Dr. Deborah Dupree, your host. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for joining us because today's episode is very special. I have with me today Lane Kennedy, and Lane presents a very unique experience, message, and purpose in terms of working with our Gen Xer generation. Lane, being a Gen Xer herself, actually founded $1 million company shortly after college, and then having jetted around the world, actually being a model, getting into the high lifestyle, and then turning to have a son, she realized that it was time to do something different, to live an alcohol-free life ahead of her. And as a result, she's turned her learnings, her experience, into powerful, pivotal changes for people just like you and me, whatever the generation might be. But she really has a purpose. And together with her partner, Tamar Medford, they have founded the Now What Society in terms of what's next. Where do we go from here? What are we going to do differently? So stay tuned, don't go away. Share this powerful podcast with your friends and colleagues. It's going to start in just a couple minutes. Well, welcome everyone to Decoding the Conflict Mindset and this special episode with our guest speaker, Lane Kennedy. Welcome, Lane.
Hi, Deborah. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. When we first crossed paths, and I think it was on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
What a powerful way. And then we had a conversation and then, got into, some of the messaging and your approach to things that I said, you've got to be on my show. This is the topic I had not heard from this angle. And so I'm excited to have our viewers and listeners learn more about unlocking the DNA potential for mindfulness and wellness. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a powerful topic. It's near and dear to my heart, and I love sharing about it because I think when people discovering mindfulness is one tool, but then discovering their DNA and then putting them together, it's like firecrackers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fireworks go off, a whole new way of living. Yes. So Lane, I've always found it very fascinating. And I know that many of my listeners and people I come into contact in my professional walks of life, in fact, my personal walks of life too, I always like to hear what's the story behind, beyond the, what do you do, where you're from, tell us about your family, not that, but instead, you've got a very unique pathway. What was the trigger for you that launched you into this direction?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. And it can be hard to share stories, but I think the stories are what make us human and make us connected and allow others to say, wait, maybe I'm like that too, or maybe I need to talk about this. So I live in long-term recovery from alcoholism. And I was afraid to say that. I was afraid to talk about that for many, many years. And it's not until the pandemic when I really just decided that enough is enough, because I knew that there were going to be other women, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, who were going to be, in their house with kids and husbands and dogs and parents who were going to be hiding and drinking. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to just put my flag, my little white flag up and say, you don't have to live like that. You can find a path of recovery. And so it's, I've just celebrated this year, it's 26 years without drinking or drugging or eating Snickers bars.
Oh, well, we all have our little things. In fact, my little dog is called Snickers because she got that coloring. So, oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up and congratulations on 26 years. That's amazing. Yeah. Because that really is powerful lifestyle choice and, can really pave the way for some new and exciting things to happen.
Yeah. I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I knew that there had to be another way to live. I would go to work and my colleagues were really happy and I was not happy and numb or discouraged, sick. And, I would look around and everybody else was laughing and free. And going and making plans. And I was like chained to my misery. And I didn't know. I was like, what's wrong with me? And I had to find help.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of things that you just said there, Lane, that I'd like to draw out a little bit. Unfortunately, sometimes we need to live in our pain for a while before we recognize just how bad it's gotten. And I use Albert Einstein's, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity.
Yes.
And I know I had a different kind of experience. It wasn't around alcoholism, but it was around a lot of death in my family that was going on for about 5 years. And I realized how anxious I had become about what next is going to happen, and I was just always on edge and so forth. And I thought, oh my gosh, a friend of mine brought it to my attention. And so, it's sometimes we have to live in pain before we realize what's happening, and so it sounds like, you realize in looking around and at least having the awareness to look around, that, maybe life could be different here. I can make choices.
Maybe things could be different. Just that thought alone is a life changer. I live in San Francisco, and I was driving with my son in the back seat, strapped into his little car seat. And there was a driver in front of me, Deborah, and he wasn't going fast enough. If you've ever been to San Francisco, the streets are not wide.
No.
Right. And there's a lot of stop signs, and there's a lot of curves, and he just wasn't going fast enough for me. I had to get somewhere. And I suddenly was having this moment of, I was just laying on the horn, honk, honk, honk. And he stopped. And then I stopped. And he opened his door, and I opened my door. And then I got out of the car.
Wow.
And he got out of the car. And I went up to him and I said, and I'm yelling, but it was during this moment that I had an out of body experience, and I saw my child in the car. The car is still going. Like, this is not, I was out of my mind. Yeah. And in that moment, I just looked at this human before me, this man who was much bigger than me. I will never forget the color of his eyes, dark blue. I will never forget the size of his truck. And he just looked at me and he said, "What is wrong with you?" And I just, I couldn't say anything. And I meekly just turned around and got back in my car, and I started crying. Yeah. And I knew that I had to change. Right. So I have this experience of stopping drinking. Right. And that kind of self-destructive behavior. But what had happened 20 or 18 years into my recovery is that I had this internal rage and anger that was festering every day. Had to feed the dog. I had to take the dog out. I had to take care of my kid. I had to work. All these things where I have to do that. Everything just got piled and piled and piled and piled. The responsibilities of life, I couldn't manage them. I couldn't handle them. And so when I had that snap in the hate district of San Francisco, I knew I needed to find something else. And that was the beginning of my mindful path. Really, that was something has to change.
Yeah. 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 It's funny how we can be, going along and living your lives. And like you said, your have to pile or list just grew and grew and grew till you felt so burdened that, it's sort of like getting knocked on the side of your head, practically, and go, whoa, how have I let this go on? And I know oftentimes, there's sometimes resistance to wanting to make change. And, because people feel that what they've been doing is wrong. It's like, no, get that languaging out of your mind. It's like, just ask yourself, how was that working for you? Is it getting you where you want to go? And if it's not, that's opportunity.
Yeah. I think we forget that there's opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. When we get so, we're behind that black curtain. We're just behind it, and we can't see, we can't even open it up a little bit because we're so burdened by life.
Yeah. 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 And that's where, as I shared with you before the show, is that, since my aha moment myself, walking around San Diego Bay back in 2011, and I got to change my life, and so it's been a journey. It's continued to be a dismantling of the baggage and all the stuff I had. And so right now my life is fairly simple, pretty clutter-free, and I'm at peace. I feel great, and so it can take time to get there. I'm much better today than I was even 2 years ago. But going back to something you said, Lane, I think it is important to recognize that we are still emerging from that pandemic era. I see it all the time, in terms of people adjusting and still a lot of fear, also a lot of opportunity. But it was quite well documented in the medical field, that drinking, particularly among females in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s, was rapidly increasing.
Yep.
And so, and I know the medical field. I had the good fortune of speaking at a conference last fall. Talked about, one of the presenters talked about that, and how some of the reports of drinking have not subsided a whole lot.
I know.
Yeah.
And they don't really subside, because once you become in the cycle of addiction, it's a self-fulfilling trap.
Yeah.
Unless you get help.
Yeah.
Like you're just, the dopamine, your neurochemistry, as you know, it changes. And until you get help, you're just in that loop.
Yeah.
So hard.
Well, I know this was before I met you, and that's why I was excited to have you on. As a result of that conference, I got to know a lot of people in the San Diego area, where I've lived for many years, but, on different levels of medical profession. And it was really neat to see even these highly educated, learned, experienced doctors just really gravitating to this whole mindfulness, mindset. And I talked about it in my keynote as well. But I learned that UC San Diego is really up and coming in terms of the field of neuroscience and the integration of mindfulness practices and meditation and so forth. And so I'd like to have you talk more about that. How can that really make the difference? I mean, I know it. A lot of the people I met at the conference were learning it. But, from your perspective, because you work with clients all over and see firsthand what the opportunities that evolve.
I think mindfulness is the secret sauce of life. And I think there's a misconception around, that's for those people, or I have to learn how to do it. And then I don't really have time to do it. I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to do it. Or there's a lot of obstacles, because that is the mind's job, right? Our thinking brain is to put obstacles on our path to help us survive life. And so when I work with a new client, I always say, it's just think about your breath. Just start with your breath. And that is going to change the dynamics of your life and how you move about the world. Because we live in this world right now. And you know this, Deborah, we're so busy. We're so busy, and we're so tech centric that people are not even going outside anymore. The pandemic made our worlds really small. And inside. And we've forgotten that there's this beautiful world outside waiting for us now, and that we can go outside. We can walk around. We can, right? I mean, I have a 13-year-old, and he's like, no, I don't want to go out. No, I don't want to go to the basketball court. And it's like, we have to get back and participate with other humans, with other beings. We have to, like, breathing the air outside. Not in.
Lane, I'm so glad you brought up about the breathing and so forth, because over the course of time in early pandemic, I converted a lot of techniques I do into short little videos on my YouTube channel.
Nice.
And one of them, the first thing I teach people is about deep breathing, because I said, we all breathe, right? And they look at me, well, of course we do. Yes, we do. However, many times we don't breathe in ways that actually serve ourselves well. There are different ways to breathe that you can actually maximize how you feel, calm the anxiety, quell the, overwhelm that might be going on, resist that urge to take that drink or pop that pill or whatever that might be. If we just breathe in the moment to just, whoa, slow down here.
Just breathing down into the belly. Who breathes down in their belly now?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
I did a class just recently, a room full of probably 100 people, all doctors, street. They work here in San Francisco. And I said, let's time your breath right now. Everybody start, like, I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds. Ready, go. Count how many breaths you take. And one person was 36, one person 22,
Oh my God.
one person 18. And I was like, okay, that's great. That's great. And I didn't tell them, more or less or what. I just wanted to get like where they were at.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, let's do another exercise where you don't breathe for 30 seconds and let's feel how that feels. Let's just see if you can do it.
Yeah.
And they literally could not do it.
Mm-hmm.
And 30 seconds, that's not long, that. Right. And so I had to explain to them that we really want to get our breath when we practice down to maybe 3 breaths for 60 seconds. And their jaws about dropped on the ground. I said, this is where you're going to drop into a different state and start changing the chemistry of your brain so you can be more focused, not so quick reactive, and they were shocked how it felt and how they couldn't do it. And I had to guide them into the breath practice. Right. And then there was great relief and excitement because they could do it.
Yeah.
They just needed a little support. And I think people forget, like, oh, I can have a teacher show me how to do this. Mm-hmm. I can actually get a teacher to show me how to do this. It's like, oh, that's mindfulness. It's so easy. I could figure it out. But people don't.
No. And that's such a great point, Lane, as far as, actually guiding, coaching people through it, because if they haven't experienced it, they don't know what the beneficial effects of it are. Yeah. And so what you do is you actually give a real time, live moment of actually experiencing what it feels like to breathe differently. And now you created an opportunity for success.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of reinforcing that new habit to change the direction of your breath to manage the moment.
Right. And that's what I want them to do, right? Like that's when we're not so abrupt or abrasive or explosive, and that could be internal or external, right? Because there's a lot of people that have the internal explosiveness, the internal corrosive thinking. And so when we can drop down into our breath and change it, we're changing that thinking. We're changing the cycle of our behavior. Mm-hmm. That is a true gift, I think, that everyone deserves now.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're having our conversation here today because I just heard an interview by Brene Brown on a CBS with Nora O'Donnell, and it was pretty fascinating. As much as she's studied and learned and read and written, we share this in common in terms of, not just the breathing that can redirect, how we're feeling internally and therefore how we're showing up externally, that you and I've just been talking about, but also even our choice of words can trigger that internal reaction. And so words matter, and so it's about replacing some of the more, you used the word before, abrasive or on fire words in ourselves, that self-talk that we do, but then also how we now change the dynamic for when we let those words come out. So I just thought that was pretty powerful, and so wanted to share that with you. I'm curious, what are some common misconceptions that people have about mindfulness and what it can do for them?
That it won't work for them.
Okay.
Literally, that is the biggest misconception, is that it's not going to work for me. Mm-hmm. That it's too hard for me. My mind won't be quiet. And I say, good, because if your mind is quiet, then you are dead, right? Like it's okay to have a mind that is constantly chattering, but it's a skill to manage it. Yeah. And I think mindfulness is that skill that manages it.
Okay. Now, one thing, that we've talked about and really attracted me to your work is I like the science of stuff. This
Yeah.
isn't just proof raw stuff, and it sounds nice, but there's real science behind it. You've already talked about that to some degree. Brene Brown certainly did. I talk about it all the time in my keynotes. But elaborate on this connection, the relationship between our DNA and mindfulness.
So, I fell in love with DNA when I had my son. I was an early adapter of 23andMe. I've been a biohacker for 25 years. I'm really into how this thing that we live in operates. And so when I started studying DNA and starting understanding how, we are this big body of sequencing. And sometimes that code is a little broken, not enough to tear you down and, put you under the ground, but it'll make you react differently. It will make you taste food differently. It turns your hair different color, right? So DNA gives us a lot of information. And when we look at a certain, for lack of a better way to do it, but a pool, a subset of genes, those genes will work with your serotonin, your dopamine, those neurotransmitters that cause the emotional waves in your day. Okay. The ups and downs, so to speak. Yes, exactly that, Deborah. So when I started going down the rabbit hole of DNA, I was like, oh my God, this is so juicy. This information is completely relevant for not only me, but for every person in the world. And when I look at when somebody comes to me and they're just, they have that internal rage, or they're super anxious, or they have like a more depressive side, I can see, okay, well, yeah, actually your DNA, it shows that your heritability is going to have something to do with this. And what are you putting into your body right now? That's going to have something to do with it. So we look at all that. And then I say, what are you doing for your overall system? How do you calm yourself down? Because what we know in scientific literature is that when we are in homeostasis, right, the body has a chance to self-correct, to calm down, to come back to point zero, so to speak. Not that the DNA sequence is going to change. Your DNA sequence is your DNA. It is what it is. But what can happen when we use the practice of mindfulness is we go to that calm state. And then we have an opportunity or a chance where the chemicals of your body can function optimally. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And just to paraphrase that a little bit, it's sort of like, if we take a look at some of these, like you were saying, what do you eat and then how do you sleep and so forth, looking at these things that could be natural irritants to how we show up.
Yes.
And if we redirect that based on our DNA, then we increase our opportunities to live in that more peaceful, healthier, well state of being. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we always want to come back to homeostasis. We always want to drop into that neutral place, because when we're there, our body has, again, it's going to operate at a higher optimal levels. When we're stressed out, no. Think about me on the side of the road, out of my car yelling, right? No, that was not a great
on the streets of San Francisco. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a good story, actually. Oh, yeah. And so where, I love the fact that you brought up the 23andMe and and how that information can be used to get a better baseline, really, is what I'm hearing you say. And so what are some emerging trends and developments in this field of mindfulness and DNA that you see happening? And I before I forget again, I also know you put a lot of emphasis on the Gen Xer. And so I'd like to have you talk about that too. So those two areas, okay?
Well, so the Gen X, there's a lot of us we're not doing great. Health-wise, I'll just start with the health-wise. The Gen X grew up in a time where there was like fast food really started to hit us. Technology started to hit us. So we didn't grow up with it like the millennials and the zennials did, but we're aging now.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we're thinking, what's wrong with my bones? Why am I achy? How come I have this heart problem? Why am I fatty liver disease? A lot of women are all of a sudden having fatty liver disease. So the Gen X, this subculture, the subgroup of people, are facing these health issues. And using mindfulness and DNA, I think, is a really powerful tool because we want to get back into homeostasis. We want the body to rest and repair. The culture, again, I just go back to how we're living. And we can say, oh yeah, I'm eating great. But are you really eating enough? Are you putting enough fiber into your body every single day to get rid of the xenoestrogens that are in your water bottles, in your cans that you're taking, all the medicine? So much medicine is being taken now. So many hormone disruptions. Why can't I lose any weight? Right? There's so many questions that this population has right now. And if we look at the history of how this group has been brought up in the world, it makes total sense to me. So now it's about finding out what works for each. We can personalize medicine at this point, which is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You can look at your DNA. You can find out like these are the lifestyle choices that you're going to need to make right now in order to age more gracefully. Everyone the Gen Xers may have parents that are aging out. They have Alzheimer's, dementia. Well, if your parents have that, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be going down that same path. If you look at your DNA, you can actually find out what are the lifestyle choices that you can make now that can actually support not going towards that. So mindfulness, looking at your DNA are going to help this direction that you want to flow in to feel good about aging. I talk about how, we're all aging. It's, we all are, but would you rather age and, be walking and running and playing, all the way up to the moment you die? Or would you rather be complaining, oh, my aching knees, my body, I need my medicine. I need right to the day you die. Like, no.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, fantastic opportunities by melding the science with our daily life practices can actually shift that direction in our future journey in the years ahead.
Absolutely. 100%, Deborah.
Wow.
Like, come on.
This is so exciting. I mean, as far as, thinking of where we are, and I'm on the younger end of the baby boomers, so watching you guys come up, and then that was all novel and different. I'm just a couple years in the baby boomer, but then the millennials coming along, and now we've got the zennials coming along. And so each generation is very different. I actually speak a lot on generational cultures and differences and things like that, because so often people are quick to blame and shame and get off of it. That's not where we're coming from at all.
No, not at all.
Different life circumstances, and on and on and on. So how about a quick example of somebody who has actually made a shift in their lives by combining this mindfulness and DNA? That would be, I think, very helpful for us.
Great. I can do that.
Okay.
My client, David, he came to me 50 pounds overweight, just miserable, just didn't know what to do. It was at that place of, why am I not living my best life? Because he should be, right? He has a job. He's got a great bank account. He's kind of set himself up for life. His kids are off to college. They're graduate, and nothing was moving. Nothing was budging. And so we looked at his DNA. We started in on this mindfulness practice. I had him practicing twice a day, no matter what. had him start moving his body very specifically for his DNA. I also put him on a very specific meal plan. And then we also got his doctor involved, and he went on metformin. So with these 3 little tweaks to his life, he lost 54 pounds.
Wow.
Changed his total outlook and perspective on life. Because when we first started, it was the blame game.
Yeah.
The blame game. And now I get messages from him all the time. This is the best life. I can't believe it, Lane. I'm doing this. I'm flying over here. I'm working with NASA. I got just
wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
But he was at that place.
Yeah.
I need to change.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. I was at that place.
Yeah. That's a great example of some very specific things. I have a question for you though, because I think a lot of times, at least what I see in my clientele is a lot of people will start meditation and so forth, but then the traditional practices can take time. Yeah. And pretty soon people slip right back into too busy to do it. So when you talk about engaging David twice in mindfulness practices, how much time we're talking about?
So typically I have a 20-minute session that I record something very specific for my clients. The first session, we're going in for an hour. We're just going in and we're going to explore. And then there's a recording that they do twice a day, every day. And then it just becomes habit.
Yeah.
It becomes their habit. And those, 12 minutes can be a juicy meditation. 30 minutes can be a juicy meditation.
Yeah.
But there's a shift that occurs where there's a craving for it. Where they desire, Dave was like, oh, I get to meditate now. Yeah. I get to start he would joke, I start my day with you, Lane. It's great.
Well, very good. Well, I wanted to be realistic about, people's commitment to time. And two things I want to say to that. One, repetition reinforces retention. So that's why, doing it once is not going to work. We need to consistently try it for several days. Actually, 2 weeks is really good to really, we're starting a new habit. We're not even trying to get rid of the old habit. Right. And then the second thing about that is that, we can generally find 10, 15 minutes. Yep. I mean, we've got it a lot throughout our day. 30 minutes is a little more challenging, but 10 or 15 minutes, got it.
I make a joke with the police officers because I teach the officers. I say, you go to the bathroom every day and no one's going to bother you in there. Yeah. You can start just right there. And they laugh at me and that's okay. But just again, starting 1 minute to 15 minutes. Yeah. Everyone can find that time.
Yep. Yeah. Well, like I always say, said earlier, is that we already breathe. Let's just do it differently. Okay. Yeah. So I want to share with our viewers Lane, you shared so much wonderful stuff with us today. And so how can people get more of you? What do you have to share with us today?
Sure. I have a DNA guide, which is really great, and a practice that they can listen to.
Great.
That's over at lanekennedy.com.
lanekennedy.com. Thank you so much. And that will be into the show description as well. And anything else that you've shared with me already. Well, you have really brought a new twist on decoding the conflict mindset. Oftentimes we think about conflict with others, but boy, we have a whole lot of conflict going on right inside our own heads. And so we need to start decoding that first. And I love how you brought the use of DNA test to really understand the underlying, physiology of who we are and how we make choices and how we live and how we eat and all that kind of good stuff that actually don't serve us well.
It all matters.
It all matters. Yeah. Well, Lane, thank you so much again for being with me. Again, for our viewers and listeners, pass it on, share it with your friends and family and colleagues who might be challenged with some of the same kinds of issues that Lane has talked about today. And come on and subscribe to the Decoding the Conflict Mindset so that you are notified about important and wonderful guest speakers like Lane, who has joined us here today. So Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc, Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Well, I certainly hope that you got some powerful gems of wisdom from Lane Kennedy. Again, what an extraordinary life, and do read her bio a little bit further. And check into her coaching program for people who may be struggling with addictions and trying to bring in a calmer, peaceful, more peaceful way of living. It can be done. She knows it. I know it. Do you know it? Coming up next, our next guest speaker, Meg Rentschler, is actually somewhat like me in terms of a mental health background. But both of us have turned our mental health, our psychology knowledge, not into figuring out what's wrong with you, but instead to figuring out what's right with you and helping identify, uncover things that will work for you going forward powerfully. She particularly works with today's leader in terms of how to face some of the challenges in our very complex work worlds and helping bring sanity, bring peace to those of you in charge of others, because when you are, they are. And so please come back 2 weeks, sign up, subscribe right now, and share this powerful podcast with your friends, colleagues. Pass it on, spread the word. Again, Decoding the Conflict Mindset, Dr. Deborah Dupree.